everyone. Welcome to Office Adding Community Call of 2025. Happy New Year, everyone. So today we have the two agenda and two topics on our agenda. And the first topic is about Office Add-ins Development Kit. And the second topic is about an update and Q&A session on an AA. So let's get started. And the presenter today will be myself, Mingjia, who is a project manager of Office Platform, and also David Chesnut, who is our senior technical writer of the Office Platform team. All right, so let's go to the first topic. And as I mentioned, that we are announcing that Office Add-ins Development Kit is generally available now. And so yes, if you go to the VS Code extension marketplace, you can see this extension already GA without the preview label there. And in this experience, in this GA version, what we added is that we are, here's the block here. And in the experience, you can see that the new experience here is that we add experience from the MS Learn document and to land directly into this Office Development Kit. So the experience would be as a new developer when they are exploring that how to build, for example, an Excel task pane add-in there. They will go through this article and through all these prerequisites. And when we go to this section that create an add-in project, they can just like click on this button to create an add-in in VS Code. And here, there is a small pop-up here. And so the developer with some clicks here, they are guided to this VS Code interface. And here I can see a dialog pop-up say allow Microsoft Add-ins Development Kit extension to open this URL. And when I click open, so you can see the sample is launched here. This Excel gets started with the Office Add-ins Development Kit. So I can just click create here and select a folder. And here it is, the sample project is created with all the codes inside this project. And yes, the README file is also pop-up, so I can also follow this README to see like what is the next step to run this sample. So I'll follow this like to click this Office Add-in Development icon and see how we can preview this Office add-ins. And from here, we can see that try to run all those prerequisites and install all those dependencies, and then I can finally run Excel add-in to launch this sample. Well, it will take some time, and yeah, I don't think we will wait that long time, but I have a demo here to show you what will happen next. So when you go through all this process I just showed, and if you go through all those dependencies, installations, it will be like 1 or 2 minutes there. And after that, we will launch Webpack to run this one. Yes, and there we go. We will have the Excel add-in launched in Excel. So you can run this one and see how it's work. And also you can go back to VS Code to see how those code works, and you can always change the code to see how it reacts on Excel add-in itself. And yes, I think that is the one that is experience, and yeah, it's running now. And if you have you can always check more information in our MS Learn document. We have a document saying how you can run this. Yes, launch now. So it's not slow, right? And so you can also see all those guidance, like how to install the kit, how to create a project, and also create an add-in from a sample. So this is like what I just shown, that is just like we launched the sample from our web page. All right, so yes, let's go back to my slide. And yes, so here are all the links and resources. You can try this kit and see more information. And if you meet any problems, you can always submit a GitHub issue to this link, and our engineers and teams will take a look at those issues. And you can also share your experience through this survey, and I will reach out to you through your maybe email or something. You can leave it there. All right, so I have all for my part. I'll paste all those links in this chat. And for next, I will hand it to David So would you like to share your screen?
Yeah, thanks, Mingjia. Yeah, let me go ahead and share. So let's see. Hopefully this is sharing. Let's minimize this. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is David Chesnut, and I work on the Office Platform team. And I wanted to share a demo of handling identity with Nested App Authentication and also do some Q&A if anyone has questions out there. So last time in the December community call, I talked about this old pattern we had with using the identity token to authorize users into various resources you might have. And I talked about how you don't want to pass this ID token over the network. We used to do that. When you got an exchange token, you could also get a user token, pass that to your resource, validate it, and use it to authorize things. But with Entra ID tokens, that's actually an anti-pattern. So I've been working on a sample that shows how to do this properly. And if folks can keep mics muted, that would help. Thanks. So what I did is there's this existing sample from the Microsoft Identity team that shows how to call an API as a protected resource. And they have this image, which I think explains it best. I made a few modifications to the image here in the slide deck just to show what's going on. So you have a single page application. So you can think of that, that's the Office add-in or the Outlook add-in. And you're going to acquire a token. This image has the old name, it's Azure, it says Azure AD, but really that should be Entra ID. But you acquire a token and then you want to call your own web API, that's your protected resource that you're going to be using. In this case, it's managing a to-do list. And the important thing I want to point out, when you acquire a token using the Microsoft Authentication Library, it always returns 3 tokens. You get an ID token, an access token, and a refresh token. And so the important thing is this ID token is returned to the single page application for use there. You're not supposed to be passing it anywhere else. If you want to call your web API, you pass the access token, which includes the ID claims in it. So you can still use ID stuff. That's kind of the important distinction here is you want to make sure you're always using an access token to access your web API. And in this case, they're going to be running on localhost 3000 and the API servers can be on localhost 5000. So let me show a demo to show how this works. So I have this test account for my Dave CH test tenant that I've signed into. And this is the Outlook add-in and open up on the right side. And what I can do is basically get a to-do list and it shows, I've already got an entry in there. I could add a new to-do to my list. I'll just make something up. So we'll just add this to-do. And then when I get my to-do list, we can see now I have 2 items there. They also come with these delete buttons, so I could delete something if I wanted to. So let's say I just had a test thing. And then I can click on this to delete it, and it removes it from the list. So I also have on my, so I'm running on desktop here. I've signed in as a different user. Here, let me go back, start from the beginning. So here I've logged in as a test user Adale Vance. So this is a different identity. And when I send an email, open up the task pane, we can see I have like a different to-do list. So here I have send out a backlog report. Let's say maybe I need to fix the garage door. How about that? Just add some random stuff. And you can see like these are in the same database in my web API, but because we're using identity, we're storing the unique ID in that database to track who's who. So over here, I'm signing as one person, over here, signing as another, so I get the correct information. So how this works, try to think where to go next. Let me just show real quick the database. This is my server. Let's look at just this project. And in the server, I have a folder for db.json, and you can see here, like it's tracking each thing, like send out the backlog report. There's a task ID that tracks the specific ID, and then there's the owner ID. And you can see there's 2 entries for this particular owner, and that came from the access token that we passed. So to set this up so that it's going to work as expected, you need to create 2 app registrations. And I have a lot of app registrations because I'm always testing on this test tenant. These top 2 are the ones I'm going to talk about today. So I have a Node API app registration, that's for my API server, and I have a JavaScript SPA app registration, which is for the Outlook task pane client. So for my API, I want to expose an API, and this is where you create your custom scopes. So if you're going to have your own resource, you need to create scopes for it. In this case, we're going to have to-do list read write and to-do list.read. So if I'm just getting things from it, I'd use the read scope. If I want to read and write, then obviously I have a read write here. Now on the left side is the full text name of each of these scopes. And this is what we'll want to use in the client side. We say, hey, here's the scope I want, so I can call my API. So that's the important piece on the server side. On the client side, the JavaScript SPA, we're going to want to be sure we have these redirects. So I have BRK multi-hub, so we can enable SSO through NAA. And I'm not going to dig into the NAA stuff that much. There's plenty of samples that cover that. I also have a couple of redirects for fallback scenarios. This sample is not complete. Like it'll be published probably by Friday, maybe Monday. It just needs to go through some more testing and review, although it is working for today's purposes. So I just want to make sure to share it. So like, for example, these 2 things I think I can combine into one thing. So that's probably something I'll fix. In terms of permissions, I want to consume that msound node API registration, and I'm going to consume both the to-do list read to the to-do list read write. So these both have been added. And this is how my client will now get access to use these scopes on the server app registration. Now, interestingly, you'll see these others show up because, as I was pointing out in the diagram, you always get these 3 scopes whenever you request access to something, because you're going to get an ID token that requires OpenID and profile, and you get a refresh token, which is offline access. So even if you don't specify these will appear once somebody consents. Okay, so that's the registration pieces, which aren't too complicated. So let's look at the client side. That would be this one. So I've got my task pane and various MSAL files. The important thing to look at is in my MSAL config, where I configure my setup to use the Microsoft Authentication Library, there's this client ID. This is the client ID of my client app registration. So that's the ID I want to use here. And then if I go to my auth config, this is where we set up some helper classes to manage the authentication pieces. And I just want to point out, like, we're going to use these scopes. And you can see this is that full text I was referring to earlier. So we're going to track them here. And anytime I'm going to call an API, I'm going to pull one of these out and say, hey, here's the scope I need. So we set them up here in this protected resources class. And then there's the account manager, which we've talked about in previous calls. This comes from another sample of just using NAA. So when I want to make a call, so like, let's say I click on the add button in the task pane, it's going to call this function to add a to-do item. So the first thing we want to do is get our access token, and you can see we're calling into that, get that string for the write scope, because we're going to write a new to-do up into our server. We set our endpoint to call /to-do list. That's the name of the REST API we set up on our server. And we're going to use a post method to write in this new value. So we're going to call the API to that endpoint, pass the access token, and then pass the value that's in the text box that the user typed in. So one thing I want to point out when this runs, let's see if these are there. Right now the sample will log out to the console. When we get that access token, I log out the ID token and I log out the access token, which are all just base64 encoded here. But you can go into, you can copy those values and go into this JWT MS site just to decode them. And I just wanted to show what's happening because there's a couple of important things. So this is an example of the ID token you get. And you notice the audience is set to the C3F80, which is our JavaScript API. We see our application ID. So what we're saying is that ID token is intended to be sent just to the client. It's not, this is why if you try to pass it to your server, it shouldn't validate. It's only intended for use there. And it includes, like the user's name. This OID is the unique ID, which is what we put in that JSON database to track it. Email, stuff like that. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to the access token, and you'll see the audience is different because now we've said I want access to my server, so it gives you the audience of the server app registration, and that will validate properly. And it also includes the same ID claims. So I have my name, my unique ID of the user, email name, and so on. So this is how you pass the identity information to your server, is with this access token, and anything it needs, it can get from here. And you also see like we have a scope here that came back. It included these two scopes in this case. So let's look at the API side, which is here. Okay. So we have an auth config also for our API server. And you notice we're going to set up our client ID to have that, the app registration of our server. And all our endpoints go to this /API/to-do list call. And we're basically supporting getting the to-do list, getting a specific by ID to-do list item. We post new to-do list items. We can also delete them. So these are like the 4 main things supported. They call into this controller with a to-do list.js. But before they hit this, wait, let me go back here. We're going to call auth helper.validate. So this is kind of chaining together, hey, when this call comes in for to-do list, let's go validate that JSON web token and make sure it's valid, because we don't want to just take any old token someone sends us. We want to make sure it's the correct one. It's issued to us, and we have correct permissions and all that. And that happens, it happens in this validation helper JS. So we have our validate JWT. So in there, we grab the authorization header from the request, and we parse through it, and we get the token out of it, and then set our validation options. So what we're going to validate here is the audience. We're going to make sure the audience is correct, and then the other thing is we're going to make sure it's been signed correctly. So we called the verify on this JSON web. This is a JSON web token library, by the way, that we're using to verify. So it'll check the signature. It'll check our audience with the validation options. And one other thing I put in here is just to set an auth info property on the request. This payload is the decoded list of all the claims. So this is how I'm going to get the identity stuff out of it. I put that in the request because later in the controller, we will take a look at that same auth info object and grab things such as OID. That's one of the user identity piece claims. The other thing we do is at the beginning of each call, we check that the required permission is there. So like in this case, if someone's getting the to-dos, I have this helper function that's going to just check, hey, do we have read permission? Or how down here, if they're doing a post, to make sure, hey, did they have the right permission? And then this helper function down here is just basically goes through and checks against our list of known claims. It's going into the scope claim that's in there that the access token will have. So I think, yeah, that's it. So those are all the main pieces I wanted to show, just to kind of walk through. Here's what it looks like end to end, how you get identity, but use an access token to pass the identity claims over to your server. And then you can use this in your database or whatever. So again, this will be ready probably Friday, Mondays, somewhere around then. Just expect to see it in the samples repo that we have. And let me go back. I think there was one other thing to mention. Well, if I click the right one. Okay, so I just want to switch gears for a sec and then maybe do some Q&A here. So Exchange Online legacy tokens are deprecated. They're being shut down. So the plan is, and this is still the same plan, nothing's changed here. So by end of February, tokens are going to be turned off for all the tenants worldwide. This will be a gradual rollout, probably over a few days. Some will turn off, then we'll turn off some more, and so on. And I just want to point out, if you use the commandlet to set the tokens on, then they will stay on. So like if you've been using this, we have this article on turning the tokens on or off. You go into PowerShell and turn them on. If you do that now, then when we're rolling out the changes to shut them down, we'll see this, that you've done this, and we actually won't change that. So they'll stay on. Then by June 2025, the tokens are turned off and it overrides any admin settings. So like even if you turn tokens on, they're going to get turned off. They're just turned off for everybody. There will be a process for limited exceptions, which we'd probably talk more about that later. We don't have details on how that works just yet. Then by October 2025, they're turned off. There's no exceptions, even the limited exceptions, they're turned off and completely shut down. So I have a link here for the Nested App Authentication FAQ, which has this timeline, as well as all sorts of Q&A for common questions we've seen about how this works, what tools are available, developer things, and so on. And then if you need to get more information, and by the way, I will paste all this into the chat because I don't know that these work in the slide. There's all this information here to the blog, to getting started with NAA. If you need samples for doing that, there's a list of samples and so on. So let me, well, actually, let me check. So are there any questions? Over here, just look at the chat. And if someone, I see there are questions. I'm just trying to figure out where's the start of them. All right, so I see there's a question that our blog indicates exchange tokens are disabled for the monthly channel in February 2025. Do we have a day in that month? Oh, February 1st, February 28th. Monthly channel. I thought it was a semi-annual channel. But yeah, it'll basically be the end of the month. We don't have like a specific day it happens, but it'll be right around the end of February is when this will go out. Let's see. What is the Safari browser thing? I just see someone's mentioned Safari browser. I don't see what the question is. Uh, So someone mentions first I'm seeing about having backend APIs needing to be registered. Is that only required if the app is hosted in Azure? It is required if you're going to be using Enter IDs, Enter ID. So like for example, if you're using MSAL to get an access token to your own service, then it will have to be registered. If you're using something else, a third-party kind of system, then it depends on how that third-party system works. Since Graph API, okay, since Graph API does not support many functions, it's not reasonable for Microsoft partners to be able to provide Microsoft customers with the same functionality when Exchange tokens are disabled. Yeah, so if you're seeing something like you're moving over to Nested App Authentication and Microsoft Graph, and you're not using the Exchange tokens anymore, and you find like there's a gap, there's something in Graph API missing, then definitely log an issue in GitHub. One of the links on that page is where you can submit issues, and just let us know. That's something we're trying to prioritize. We want to make sure no one's blocked by something that's missing in the Graph API. Going through questions. Are there samples with other authn providers such as Keycloak? No, we don't have any samples like that. If there's something specific you're looking for, you could open up an issue like in the samples repo if you wanted and just let us know about what scenario you're looking for. Someone's asking, is there a way to know if the logged in user is an admin and that they can accept the admin consent scope? That I would need to get back to you on. That question has come up before, but I'd have to go look up what the answer was on that because I don't remember off the top of my head. So we might answer that maybe in the next community call. Or feel free to submit a GitHub issue asking about that if you want, and we can answer it in GitHub. Is NAA in preview? Oh, so that's a good question. So there's NAA is GA for Outlook, pretty much, and let's see. If you go to, I'll just get the link here. There's a requirement set for NAA, Nested App Auth, and this actually has a table. I'll put this in the chat. There you go. So there's a table in there that says, here's where it's GA, here's where it's not. So it's primarily GA for Outlook. It's not GA for the Word, Excel, PowerPoint, although that's coming soon. So let's see here. Install application using Admin Center. So I'm just looking to see if there's any NAA questions or questions about that demo. So I'm still looking through this. I guess I'll stay online and keep going through these for the next half hour. If there's still questions, I'm happy to help answer. Mingjia, do you want to, I could turn this back over to you at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Okay,
thanks
it's quite a
everyone
lot of questions.
for
Yeah.
all the questions, and yeah, I'll keep going through these and working to answer these in the chat.
So I think if someone have some like questions you want to raise your hand and ask now, you can just raise your hand and ask now, and David can answer that. And otherwise, David will like look into the chat and answer them like asynchronous. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Lauren. Yeah.
Hi, we have a Teams application that is also available as a plugin into Office 365, like Outlook, PowerPoint, Word, Excel. So how is this SDK different from the Teams SDK that allows us to do the same thing?
And sorry, which SDK are you referring to? Are you talking about Nested App Authentication?
Microsoft Teams Teams app, Microsoft Teams SDK.
Oh, are you asking a question about the sorry, the thing you're demoing, Mingjia?
Are you asking a question about DevKit?
Yes. The SDK that we just saw, the authentication part is the second one. The one that we have is we are using is MS Teams, the client.js, which also does MSAL. So how is that different from the one that we just saw?
You mean the Teams toolkit? Because
Yeah.
I guess that your question is that you are using the Teams toolkit to develop a Teams app, and you wonder the difference with the one showed in this community call, right?
Yes, because
Okay.
that also helps to create these Excel plugins, Word plugins, and also Team Outlook.
Oh, okay, I get it. So this is a really good question. So the answer for that is that the dev kit I just showed in this community call, and this is for creating is for creating XML manifest adding for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And because, like we also have the unified manifest, the JSON-based manifest, right? So if you're going to create one app that would like to work across Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and also Teams and Outlook, and the Teams toolkit would be the tool that you are choosing to go with. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, welcome. So next one, I think we have Leon.
Yeah, hi. This is Leon from Standards Core. This is my first time on this call, so I'm really happy to meet everybody that is. I just quickly Googled when Ward NAA will be generally available, and it's suggesting it's scheduled for June of 2025, according to the AI answer. We are aiming to ship a Ward add-in hopefully by the end of January, certainly within the first quarter. What do you recommend the strategy? What should we do right now? We are basically developing the add-in. We haven't done anything with the authentication yet. So knowing the timeline, what would you recommend we do? Do we just jump on NAA or kind of hedge and do it the old way and the new way in parallel? What should we do?
Yeah, hi Leon. Yeah, that's a good question. So it's NAAGA is rolling out, at least for Windows, across different channels. So like the semi-annual channel, so like monthly channel is already supported in GA. Semi-annual will be supported. It's either January or February. So I mean that's coming up real soon. And then the last one is there's a semi-annual extended, I think it was called, that is out near June somewhere, and that might be what the response was referring to. So I mean, you're pretty much covered. I mean, you're covered on Mac, mobile, all those are GA already. And sorry,
for Ward specifically.
were you asking about Word?
Not Outlook, for Ward.
Oh, okay, yeah, because that's not GA yet. So if you're trying to use NAA, you'll have to use a fallback mechanism if it's not there. Trying to think, like, could you even do that now? I mean, it is in Word, like in preview. You could use it that way. But what I'd recommend, like, if you don't know if you're going to be on that, you can do a check. You can look for that requirement set. There's a nested app auth requirement set. They can check for it to see if it's supported. If it's not supported, you just fall back to using, I would refer to it as like the old-fashioned login. Instead of calling create a nestable public client application, that's the API to use NAA, which gives you single sign-on. You would call create public client application, so you don't use the nestable part. So you don't get single sign-on. The user will get prompted to sign in. Once they've signed in, they're good to go. So that would be the difference in the user experience, but that's the fallback you could use. That's what I would recommend to use. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? I see hands.
Yeah.
Um,
See, yeah. Go ahead, please.
oh, hi everyone. I hope you guys can hear me. I just have a question. Is that for NAA, we're doing the login authentications and for our company, and the accounts that we're using to log in is the same account. For example, Outlook, the account that we're using to log in to the Office add-in or the Outlook add-in is the same accounts as the account that log in for Outlooks. Is there any way that we can do the automatic logins that utilize that instead of user have to like opens the instead of user, whenever user like open a task pane, they have to like single sign on again, and it's prompting repeatedly, and it's not good. So, do you have any recommendations? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So just to be sure I understand it, it sounds like what you want to see is a single sign-on experience, so the user, they first sign into Outlook, and then they open up your add-in, and you want the add-in to just automatically get that same account, the signed-in account, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so, and that should work. If you're using MSAL Nested App Authentication, it will get the signed-in user account automatically. So basically, you would call acquire token silent, because ideally you avoid prompting the user. So you say, hey, get me the token silently, and it should, as long as there isn't some extra step that has to be taken, like say they didn't consent, then they would be prompted to consent. And at that point, you would call acquire token pop-up. So I guess, are you doing that, but you're seeing it not work? Is that what's happening in this scenario?
Yeah, it is. I don't think it's working because every time I'm using the NAA at the moment, it's always whenever I open the add-ins, it's always prompt a Windows and then say the user have to log in, and if I close it and I open again, it's another Windows that makes user have to log in again. So that is kind of annoying. So that is what I'm trying to raise here. But yeah, if you have any tutorials or something, then I would really appreciate if you can share something, and that would be nice. Yeah, that's all for me.
Okay, yeah. If you go to the FAQ, there are some links, I believe, near the bottom. Well, actually, in the I'll post the links, but there are like several samples we have that show how to use NAA. There's a walkthrough in the documentation. I guess I would ask, like, if you followed that and it's still not working, like it's prompting, then what we need to know is like, well, what is it? is it giving an error that indicates why it's prompting? Like, is it a legitimate thing, like it's looking for consent, or is there actually something's not configured properly? In which case, I would say go create a GitHub issue on our Office.js repo and include some information. In the FAQ, there's like a section where it says, here's how you can get some debug logs and other stuff. And lots of times that can help pinpoint what's going on. Especially like if it's only one platform, like if this is working on Windows, but like it's not working on Mac, then we'd want to see what's happening, like get the logs on Mac and find out what's happening there.
So one last question regarding with the FAQ. So we are using the GitHub mainly, or I saw that there's another channels in the blog in the blog, I think. The official page to raise the questions, and rarely people's answer on that. So should you recommend that from now on we should only using the GitHubs to create the FAQ?
Yeah, let me put the link in just so you have it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll just grab it here real quick and put it in.
Thanks. That's for me. Yeah.
Okay, there it is. Yeah.
So next one is Hardik. Hello.
Yeah, Hardik. Yeah. So my question is like we are developing the Office.js add-in, okay, and we wanted to give access to only the internal folks via the admin center, right? And we have uploaded our manifest into the admin center, and the respective user who have the access which we have provided, they are able to see that add-ins. But now what happened is other people's also trying to launch that add-ins, or our task pan is inbuilt to the specific contract documents or some documents, right? So when they load, it's showing the loading error. So rather than showing that loading error, can we show some default page or some configuration that you don't have access, you have to connect with your admin for getting access to this task pan or something, or Office add-ins? Is it possible? Did you get my question, David?
Yeah, let me see if I understand that question correctly. So it sounds like you use central deployment on a tenant so that the users on that tenant can use your add-in and they're all good to go.
Yeah.
But the part I kind of got a bit lost on was it, so there's other people on other tenants that are also using it? Or
no, on the same tenant, but we haven't explicitly not allowed access to that.
Oh, I see.
And instead of
that's interesting.
Instead of not showing that error, we can display some page like onload page or the before page, right? Rather than the login page or any other page, we can show that you don't have access to this add-in. You can connect with other your admin and you get an access, something like that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through that. That's an interesting scenario. I haven't seen that before. There might be a way to do it. Like the admin can set up various policies.
But usually scenario is like, for example, the C-level people or the department heads, right? They get the access to the specific documents and they have ability to perform some action through the add-ins, right? And who are for example, technical team or the developer, they don't have access to that specific add-ins, correct? In that case, what happens is, as we have the functionality in Office.js that we can inject the task pan on the auto load for the auto load, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So what happens is that task pan will get injected into the specific document when the department head or someone who have the access can work with the task pan, right? Now that, for example, I'm the developer and I received that document from my department head. What I see is I see the document, but at the same time, what I see is that right hand side task pane has been loading, and it is not displaying anything. Rather than it is giving that yellow error and the white page. If you remember, or if you get an idea about what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so the task pane opens,
Correct.
but then
correct.
it's something's failing. I guess
Correct.
like the question would be
Yeah.
like how do you, what's the criteria for knowing if someone has access or not?
Correct.
Like, is that a
Correct.
setting in the document itself, or is this
Yeah. Correct.
something?
Yes, I agree. Right.
Yeah, I mean, like that would be like you need to figure out a way, like how do you detect that programmatically?
Correct.
So I mean, I'd be happy to talk more offline with you if you want. This one sounds a little more in depth and complicated.
Sure, no problem.
So
Please be.
I'll share my email if you want to reach out to me.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, I'll just put it in the chat here. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
So next one, I think it's Michael D. Hello.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you.
Great, thank you. So I had asked the question earlier about the backend application needing to be registered, and I'm still not quite clear on it. So just for context, my add-in, it's only for internal users. We don't make it publicly available. And presently and in the future, it will need to access another internally hosted REST service that doesn't use any kind of Microsoft. It uses a third-party tool to authenticate users. And so like, I'm not expecting to have to use like their Windows ID or their Entra ID is not going to do them any good to try to access or authenticate this. We kind of use like a non-human ID. We pass in the user's name via header, whatever. So like, I'm kind of confused about what the necessity is to register this internally hosted non-Microsoft authenticated REST service so that the new add-in can use it. Like, what does that get me?
Yeah, I can answer that partially, though this might be a question more for the identity team to dig into some more details. But like for one thing, so your REST service, you receive an access token. You have no idea where that access token came from or if it's valid or anything, right? You don't want to just trust it. So one of the things you're going to check is to make sure, was it sent to me, which means I need to see some kind of ID identifying it as mine. So when you register, you're creating that ID that gets used. That's one of the things that's in there. The other thing you're doing is you're specifying scopes because you're going to want users or admins to consent to whatever that REST service is going to do on behalf of the user, to say, hey, there's a service out there and it's going to be doing stuff with users' information, right? So this is Entra ID's way of setting that up for you. I don't know, how your REST service is set up, like what features it has and so on. But in general, that's kind of the idea of why you would register it, so that when Entra ID creates that access token, it can encode, like it says, oh, they want the read scope. So I will put that read scope in there for that REST service to know that that's what they requested. So I don't know if hopefully it's helping. But if you're doing like a third party thing, something different, I mean, like you still have to do those things, even if you're using a third party. Like you still have to have a way of validating that this token is what you intended, and that the user is correct and they've been authenticated and all that. But yeah, I don't know. Like third parties might do it a little differently.
Yeah, I mean, well, we have something in front of it, that IBM Access Management, that like users who don't have access to it just can't hit the API. Like that stops them on the front end. And so this just feels like a weird extra layer, like, because this REST service is not just for our add-in. We've got a REST service project that serves a bunch of different services for a bunch of different purposes. And so I don't know if pulling this into some app registration is going to make the other things that use it suddenly not work.
Yeah, so in that case, I guess the question would be like, what is it that you're trying to get over the bridge? You know, like, are you trying to get the username from Enter ID and then pass that username to your service? And then you just want to be sure that's being handled securely. Because I mean, like, if the service is working and it doesn't need anything in particular from Enter ID, then you'd probably have, I mean, it's probably set up okay.
Yeah. I mean, like today, our current version of the add-in is it's IIS hosted Windows authentication. So people in certain Windows groups have access to it. And so we pull their ID in from like the Windows identity. And that's what we use to say this is the person, right, that's doing it. And then we pass that to the backend service of like, this is the same person. And that's how we do that.
Yeah, that sounds fine. In that case, you're outside of the Enter ID space.
Yeah. Okay. So we don't have, okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, this discussion is all just in the context of, hey, if you're using Nested App Authentication, here's how you get ID claims over to your server. But if you have a different system set up and it gets the identity, that's totally fine. Yeah.
Okay. So it's not a requirement. Okay. I just want to make sure that like we didn't have to add this whole other layer on top of it. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so we have last question. Violet, hello.
Yeah, hi. I mean, I'm literally just parroting my question from the chat, really. You mentioned a few times a Graph API GitHub repo where we could raise issues perhaps with the deficiencies or things that we need to have access to there because they're not available via other means or whatever, but it's not entirely clear where that is. And if you look at the graph, the main graph thing, the Microsoft Graph thing on GitHub, it's got 235 separate repos. So, which one do we need to go to?
Yeah, so this one is actually more on the Office dev side, so it's not a graph.
I understand
repo.
that, but
I'll just put the link in here. So it's to the issues. It's the Office JS repo on Office Dev.
Yeah, no, there was a couple of times where Graph API was mentioned, and you had pointed specifically for Graph API. But all right, never mind. We'll keep throwing those out into the wind on user voice.
Yeah, no, don't use user voice.
We all know what user voice means.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this wouldn't. I would say don't go to the feature requests. I forget exactly what that URL is. Like, just go to our Office.js repo if you see a gap in the Graph API and let us know there. It'll be quicker for us to track it because we want to prioritize those.
Sorry for being so derogatory. It's just like it's hard. It's a lot of ways of communicating publicly are getting shut down. So this is good to know. Cheers.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. It's a bit confusing. But yeah, for these nested app things, Exchange token stuff, and specifically, like definitely Office.js, we've kind of just set it up like that's its own special case, like because we want to prioritize those. So just let us know there.
Sure. Cheers.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I think there's no questions, no raised hands, but I think there's still questions in chat.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I'll go through the chat stuff.
Yeah.
Try to answer whatever we don't get to. We'll put it into the next community call.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, David. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. And let's share my screen back. And so for today, we don't have the Q&A sessions from the survey. And so we'll go to this new to Office add-in section and paste all those links into chat so you can click on whatever you're interested while you're listening to me. So If you're new to Office add-ins, you can check all those resources like our documentations, the quick start for WXPO, and also the script lab, our samples, and also you can check those links to check the M365 developer program and also the Office scripts. And as we mentioned previously, if you would like to engage with team, you can go to this like lots of links for all those different purposes. For example, the technical questions about Office add-ins, the product bugs, and also the feature requests and ideas. So you can go to these 4 links, and the product bug link is the one that David mentioned before. And yes, and also we have lots of other community calls in the M365 developer community. So if you're developing a solution for all those platforms, feel free to check all those community call links so that you can get some monthly updates and biweekly updates and all the resources related to other platforms. All right, so that is all for today's community call, and this recording will be available after this call, like a couple of days after this call on this YouTube channel. So you can go to this channel to see the recordings there, and you can also follow us on Twitter, like these 2 links. And our next call would be February 12th at the same time, and the agenda will be posted on the week of the call. And if you have any questions, you can submit it to this form and it will be answered during the next call. So thank you, everyone. Here's all for this community call, and have a good day. Bye-bye.